Everything sounds great. It's time to record. So what exactly is red light syndrome? Red light syndrome is the name we give to those who struggle and can't seem to play what they normally can play once they hit the record button. As defined by Urban Dictionary, and very accurately may I add, where a person has musical talent, but once they are being recorded, they fall to pieces. Symptoms of red light syndrome include pale skin, cold sweats, and frequent mistakes. This isn't to be mixed up with not being able to understand how recording works. Those who are cursed with this syndrome completely understand the process. Now, this happens to most players with an exception of a few, and if you're one of the unlucky ones, then this video will explain and give you some tips and tricks on how to cure or at least better control this annoying and super frustrating obstacle. Real quick, welcome to my channel. My name is Matt. I post weekly guitar videos that can help you improve not only your playing skills, but your recording and performing abilities, as well as understanding things like gear and tone. So if you'd like to learn about those things, consider hitting the subscribe button down below. So let's jump into the first quick tip on how to beat red light syndrome. Prepare, prepare, prepare. Know the parts ahead of time, but don't just know the parts, be the parts. Make whatever you are recording second nature. Now, I know this one's a little bit obvious, but each tip will build into the next, going into more detail on how to beat this struggle, so it's important you watch to the end so it all adds up and makes the most sense. Now, when you really know your parts and you don't have even the slightest amount of hesitation, this should make the recording process much easier for you. There's nothing worse than having to deal with red light syndrome on top of not completely knowing your parts. You're kind of just setting yourself up for failure at that point. And if you're the type of player who also likes to wing it to get some of that studio magic, then that is still possible. So just wait until a later tip and I'll go into more detail about that. Now, let's say you know your stuff. You are 100% ready, but you're still messing up bad when it comes time to record. Another possible thing that could be holding you back is not being very good with a click. There's a lot of great players out there who can play whatever, but once they put on a metronome, their playing sort of falls apart. I know this because I used to be that player. I didn't understand how to keep up with it and play what I wanted to play at the same time. The more comfortable you are playing with a click will make the recording process so much easier and less stressful. If you never played with a click before, just download a free metronome app on your phone and start with a slower BPM just to get the hang of it. Don't try and immediately play fast with it. This will frustrate you even more and you won't get anywhere with it. You sort of have to go back to the basics when learning how to play in time or to a metronome. This definitely takes some practice, but once you understand it, it's sort of like a light bulb moment and it'll immediately just click for you. Pun intended. Now, this video is just a guide with some tips. So I'm not going to get into how to learn to play with the click. That will be a whole other video for another time. But if you want to start learning how to use one, you can check out my last video where I briefly go over and show you how I use a metronome. I'll link that down in the description below, so check that out after watching this video. Okay, so let's now say you're a walking click track who prepares to the extreme, but you're still having a hard time with this syndrome. Now, before I go into a little trick that I used to do, first let me ask you a few questions, and depending on your answer, you can possibly help yourself without going any further. Are you recording at home by yourself, or are you recording with other people in the room or at another studio? If you are one who jumped right into recording at another studio in front of people with no prior practice, then that could be your issue. Going into another studio, recording in front of people, or even for someone can be nerve-wracking as is, especially without any prior experience. If this is you, then it's super important you start home recording on your computer or at least your iPhone. There's tons of free recording softwares for your computer. If you have a MacBook, then you have GarageBand for free. And also, there's a lot of recording gear that is very affordable these days, but if you can't afford that, then like I said, you can still use your iPhone. If this is the path you want to take and you want to start recording for more people or maybe even become a session player in the future, then this is a must. It's great you're getting the experience with recording with others in another studio, but learning and understanding the ropes of it and getting used to this process will calm those nerves down a little bit more. Now, if you are one who only home records, then there's two ways we can narrow down your situation. One, you still struggle with getting good takes when you're recording alone. Or two, you are rock solid with home recording, but once you step out into another studio, then that's when you start to mess up and you have this problem. For the first one, I bet this is mainly because you just got started with this process. It takes a lot of time to get used to and comfortable with this, just like anything else. You could also be overthinking while trying to get that perfect take because you're on your own unlimited time and you're being way too critical on yourself. When this happens, this will actually make your playing and your recordings even worse, in my opinion. You have to limit yourself the amount of takes or else it will turn into a nightmare. Trust me. You will have 100 takes of something, and yeah, maybe that 100th take is the one, but how much different is it compared to the other 99? A great quote that I learned and helped me through this was, "Perfection is the disguise for insecurity." If you're in a real studio setting, you're not going to have the time or money to be doing 100 takes of each track. So it's good to get this bad habit out of the way sooner rather than later. Now, the trick that I used to do was put on a backing track and record myself playing over it 2 times. I would then pick my favorite out of the 2 and post it somewhere on social media. Even if I knew I could play better, I posted it anyway. The more and more I did this, the more I started to enjoy the first couple of takes without overthinking it. It also saved me a shit ton of time and I wasn't so critical of myself. And eventually I got so used to recording that I wasn't even that nervous anymore. My playing finally sounded like my playing even when I was recording, which was not always the case. My playing was at least 20% worse when I first started to record. But thankfully now that number has decreased. Which leads me into another piece of advice. You may never be 100% comfortable with recording, and that's okay, but you can work at becoming more and more comfortable with it. Henry Fonda used to puke before every single performance, even when he was 65. So to some, the fear or struggle may never go away, but if you dedicate yourself enough and really work at it, you'll be just fine. You have to understand that it's not your playing that is the problem when the record button is pushed. It's all a mental thing. It's all in your head. So if you're someone who home records just fine, but once you step into another studio territory, it all falls apart, just know that the problem is not your playing. The first time going into a new studio, you'll be a little nervous, and by the end of the day, you'll be a little less nervous. The next time you go, you'll feel even more comfortable, and over time, it'll all just work out because you're used to this process now. So for the last and final tip, you have to be comfortable and used to recording in order to fully beat this issue. So if you're dealing with red light syndrome right now, you can't expect it to just immediately go away. It just takes time, but when you finally get to that point, that's when you can start to be more lenient with your playing and you can start to wing it to get that studio magic. And by studio magic, I mean improvising over your tracks and coming up with something great during the recording itself. So if you understand this concept and follow some of these tips, you'll be on your way to beating red light syndrome and playing like the true guitarist you are when it comes time to record. If you'd like to book a private guitar lesson where we can cover more about this or anything you want to learn on the guitar, you can do so with the link down in the description below. Thanks for watching this week's video. I hope it was helpful. Let me know down in the comments if you ever had to deal with this and some things that you maybe did to help you get out of this struggle. I'll see you next week, and don't forget to keep on playing.